Hi, you guys. I just wanted to say thank you for taking a moment of your time to let me share my heart. This is actually take 3, and hopefully I can get through this. But this is my story, my journey about how God placed a dream in my heart for Africa. 19 years ago, I didn't have the maturity to write the date down, but when my oldest son, Hunter, was a small infant, I had a dream in our home in Grapevine. It was a dream where I knew that I was dreaming. I'd never had a dream like that, and I knew God was speaking to me. So in this dream, I was in Africa. Not desert like I had imagined, but rather a little bit lush with green, and there was some specific trees around and buildings. And I was with a small group of children, and I was teaching them, and I laughed and toward the Lord. I don't speak any African dialect. I'm not sure why you have me here. And I felt at peace, and I was laughing, and all of a sudden I literally could feel wind on my skin while I was dreaming. And I was zoomed out of the planet, staring at the earth from the heavens, and the outline of Africa was on fire, and I woke up. And I woke Mark up at that time, and I knew that I'd had a dream that was supernatural. That's the only way I can explain it, and wasn't sure what God was birthing, but there was a stirring in my heart. And for a long season, I wasn't sure what that meant, but we prayed with many friends who were serving in Africa, some who had gone on to the Congo and served during the Rwanda crisis. And I always just kept asking the Lord, what is this passion in me for Africa? What were you trying to tell me? And so for many years, it was just waiting and praying without answers. And so in 2008, our last child was born. We were blessed to have 4 children. We have 3 sons and a daughter. And our last child was born, Baden. And one of my closest friends gifted me that April with tickets to a U2 concert. And it was April, but the tickets were for October, a concert here in Dallas at American Airlines Stadium, actually Cowboy Stadium, and the new Cowboy Stadium. And so Mark and I attended this concert, and I was excited, but through the concert I was a bit emotional, couldn't understand it. We met this couple next to us who was Hindu, and we were just having a good time, just young couples, but I was crying through most of the concert, and that was kind of odd, and I was raising my hands almost like I was in a worship time. During that concert, Bono started singing Amazing Grace, and all of Cowboy Stadium was singing Amazing Grace, and I was a bit taken back. It was powerful. And towards the end of that concert, I've always been a Bono fan, somebody I wanted to see in concert for years. I appreciated who he was and his passion for humanitarian needs and crises throughout the globe. And he gave an appeal for Africa, some other countries, and had people come through the stage and speak, and I was just wrecked. I can't explain it any other way than that, and I thought something I'd wanted to do for so long, I found myself weeping through most of the program. So that was October of 2008. In January of 2009, I took a job at Mardell's Christian store, and was excited to work there, work with some good people, and my job was actually in the books department. I had a beautiful lady come into the store, and she requested help to locate a book called A Hole in Our Gospel. That's this book right here. And shortly after I located it for her, when I turned to show her where it was, she was weeping and crying, and she definitely had gotten my attention, and she had shared with me a little bit how the book had impacted her and her church, that someone had gotten 700 copies, one for every member of their church in Grapevine, and it was powerful. So I took this book home and started to read it, and was very moved by it. Some people can get lost in statistics, but I found it powerful, and that the message really is that God calls us to the orphan and the widowed. And get a tissue. So while reading this book, and actually I'm going to pause for just a moment, I apologize, but I had met with a mentor and someone because God was stirring in my heart about Africa after the U2 concert, and still not knowing why. So just want to be clear that there was a real burning in my heart going on. So I purchased this book and get this book and begin to read it. And he says, it's about page 100, and I'm going to paraphrase, hopefully do it respectfully, but he's sharing that there's a gentleman who speaks and says that we would never tolerate the injustices that we see taking place in the world today. We wouldn't tolerate them if they were taking place in Europe or North America, but that we would stand by and watch an entire continent burst into flames. And he was talking about Africa, and it was actually Bono. And I kind of threw the book across the room like a hot potato. What flashed back before me was the dream that I had had 19 at that point. I don't know how many years ago, but all those years ago, about Africa being on fire. And I knew God was stirring something in my heart. So I had that was January, and a few months later, I met a beautiful woman at work. Her name was Marcy, and her son was in Africa. And I thought maybe that was another answer. I was just to keep praying. His name was Scott. We prayed through his journey there, and connected with her, and she would come in the store periodically and give me updates on him. It was kind of a confidential situation while he was there, and so prayed for his safety and other friends again that we had there, and just still not sure what God was doing in my heart. And I was excited, but still felt like I was longing and waiting and waiting. And so again, just waiting for answers. But shortly after the book incident at work, I'd had a lady also come in and asked if we carried posters. I know that's going to sound strange, but I thought, posters? We have educational posters. And I told her no. And then the next morning when I got into work to get ready and vacuum and prepare a certain area, when I looked in our music department, sure enough, tucked in the corner was a section of posters. And I thought, how did I miss that? I felt really guilty. So I'd walked over to them to take a look, having never paid attention, and the posters were actually parted, and it was to a poster of Africa. And again, I knew God was stirring in my heart, so I just continued to pray. So things kind of cooled down for several years. We sponsored a young child in Africa. We felt like that was an answer. We had friends that were serving at Rift Valley Academy. We prayed with them. They started an amazing program, and our friends, the Pipers, Steve wrote a book called A Dream So Big. And again, my heart's just stirred, torn for a continent, excited for what God would do, but just still waiting to see what my piece of that puzzle was, until last year. And things kind of picked up pace last spring in 2016. My son was playing baseball in Waxahachie, my oldest son, and I'd gone out to watch him, and his girlfriend and her father, who's a pastor at First Baptist Colleyville, Craig, was sharing with me about an organization called Family Legacy. And I said, oh, I've never heard of them. And Abby said, we tried to tell you about it in the fall, sports camps and things, and I didn't recall that. But after Craig began to speak about Family Legacy, something in my heart stirred. And I took out my phone. It was very cold that night. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I took out my phone and looked up the website, and immediately I felt like the dream that I dreamed 19 years ago had come to life. That I could actually see the place that I had dreamed about on a map. And there was this tree, this figure, this symbol, and I hadn't put all that together, but I didn't understand it. I just knew that God was doing something in my life, and I watched the video about Family Legacy, and it was powerful. I've since learned a lot about Zambia, but I was excited, and the journey began. After that weekend of my son's baseball, I came home and I told my husband he wasn't able to attend the baseball tournament that weekend, but I shared with him that I had felt like I'd gotten an answer maybe to this dream, and asked him to pray with me. We watched the videos together and reviewed the website, and we agreed that we would just spend time asking the Lord if this was the answer. And so very quickly after that, at work that week, we had had some storms here, and I felt like it was a really strange thing that the storms hit very early in the morning. My kids were all at school, and instead of really being worried, I felt peaceful, but I felt like God was stirring and doing something. And while I was at work, I had shared with the ladies, we had a pause. We were supposed to have our staff meeting, but I had shared with them the story that I've much just told you about, this dream that I had for Africa, and U2 concert with Bono, and a hole in our gospel book, and just all of the journey up to this point, and that I had finally maybe gotten an answer to this dream in a conversation that I'd had and learned about Family Legacy over the weekend. And after our staff meeting wrapped up, I went into my office and sat down and began to get to work. And our president had come back, and she had said, Christy, remember I told you that I had a podcast this morning, and you're not going to believe this, but the woman who's coming in, Marcia Day, actually attends Gateway, and she's sharing about Braxton's House. They're raising funds for this book that she's written about her son, their journey with their beautiful son. and how in his memory they're raising money for Braxton's house, and it was actually at Family Legacy. And so having never heard about Family Legacy before, and then having this happen all within the same weekend, obviously you know that I was in some shock. None of them had heard of Family Legacy before either, and I could not believe that God was just bringing together, again, what I believe to be all the details. So prayed and was excited, and again, the season just kind of went to pause, but this was last year in the spring, and then in the fall, I was blessed to attend an event at the home. We were invited to go to a Family Legacy meeting at the Washburns home in Dallas, and I was able to hear people's testimonies who had gone on a trip to Africa with Family Legacy to their Camp Life program, and had taken their families. And when you go, what happens is when you go on this mission trip, for every person that attends, like myself and my daughter that is wanting to go, Maddie, you actually bring in 10 orphans from the slums or surrounding communities. And these are kids that might be, there's no adult in their life. And so they're bringing them to camp that week, and you have those children for the week, and you get to mentor them and love on them. And there's an interpreter if that's needed. And so I learned all of these things in much greater detail at this meeting. But when I was going in, there's another piece of the puzzle I want to show you, is that back in the spring, a sweet friend of mine bought me this necklace. She had seen me looking at it, went over to the booth, and it's actually made by women. It was an organization that has women who are in need, helps them make money. They do different things from baskets to jewelry, but this particular necklace says, for such a time as this. And she had seen that I'd been eyeballing it, Suzanne, and she bought this necklace for me. And so it happened to be on that night attending this meeting that I actually wore this necklace unplanned, and I was rubbing it kind of nervously before Mark and I went into the meeting, and he was gathering his notes, and I happened to look down at my phone and was scrolling through Facebook, and Pastor Craig, who had shared with me about Family Legacy on their Colleyville page on Facebook, I believe Craig's message, either his series or what was going on, was entitled For Such a Time as This. And I just felt hot all over my body, and again felt like God was trying to tell me something. And so blessed through this meeting, but then the one thing that I'm just in my flesh going to admit to you was I wasn't sure about the details and financially how I could raise this money or what I could do to make this trip possible. And so I kind of put it on the back burner and just waited to hear from the Lord. Well, that was last fall, and here we sit this spring. And last week I was really honored to have an opportunity to meet with Heather Washburn again, and Holly with Family Legacy, and we just had a brief luncheon as we were going to be having a get-together at our church at the Dallas campus. And so prior to that get-together, we were able to share lunch together, and I got to tell them the story that I just shared with you and how God was working in my heart. And I reached over as Holly had this beautiful necklace, and it had a tree on it, and I was kind of taken back by that tree. It reminded me of again the dream that I had had. And she said, yeah, Christy, it's the tree of life. And Mark had just shared and was saying just this 19-year journey of how I've been waiting to hear from the Lord, that, he said, we looked at that scripture and we all know it, that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And Holly sweetly immediately said, you do know the other half of that scripture, don't you? And I said, actually, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't. And she said, well, a longing fulfilled is the tree of life. And I was just really taken back. And so one more sweet piece of the puzzle was there, but I was so overwhelmed in that moment that I didn't even share with them this until later. But I had just recently, in the last few weeks, had stepped away from my job and really felt like God had me in this beautiful season of transition. And right before I did, the ladies blessed me with having a birthday, a little celebration for me on the final Friday at work. And Jessica at work had given me this, honey, can you see it? I'm kind of embarrassed, I can't see the video, but she had given me this box, and they'd given me all sorts of sweet things, but this particular box obviously has a tree on it. My husband didn't know about this gift, and Jessica had said that when she was looking for something for my birthday, that when she saw it, it reminded her of the tree of life and how she felt about me, and just my love and heart for the Lord, and she felt like that was representative. And so I would just say that God's brought all these details together. I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I wanted to help weave for you the story of where I feel like 19 years has come together. So I'm just asking you for your, first and foremost, your prayer support. Nobody wants to do anything without prayer covering. The opportunity has come up after I met with Holly and them, that they asked if I knew anybody who might want to go prior to our conversation starting, but the only week that they had space available was week 7. If you know our family, the number 7 is very significant, important to us. And so that was an opportunity. And it's presented itself for my daughter Madison and I to be able to go to Zambia this July. And so I ask you again to consider praying for us as we work through those details. We're raising financial support to make this trip possible, not only for ourselves, but for our interpreters, and with each of us going, that means 20 children will be coming with us to camp. Each of us will have 10 children that they're ministering to for that week. And so I'd ask for you to prayerfully consider helping sponsors for the trip. It's humbling to ask for support, and something that I have to admit it's difficult for me to do, but God's put it on my heart to put this together. So I just want to thank you again for your time. If you have any questions or want to reach out to Mark and I and our family with any more details, we'd be honored to share with you more of our heart and passion. But again, hopefully you hear my heart. Hopefully I was able to articulate just a dream and a passion that I have. And again, thank you for letting me share. Have a blessed night.